You see, the budget documents, as I have said, are about committed spending. Things like an NDIS that only become more expensive the more people who access it, and that's not rawly about immigration, but that is about all people from everywhere, from the hospitals being born in the hospitals here, yes, to the people coming into the country, but people who eventually need access to the NDIS. It could happen through accidents. It could happen through chronic disease, which doesn't become more debilitating until later in life. All of that, of course, covered by the NDIS. Now, when the government says that they want to do what the majority of voters say, which is cut spending, remember, 66% of people say cut government spending because they don't like the idea that we have deficit after deficit after deficit where they will spend more than they take for the next 40 years. When the government talks about a reduction in government spending, this is how they sell it to you.
Savings.
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 But when the same ideas are made by the opposition, they weaponise it using the C word.
Cuts.
Cuts. Cuts.
Cuts. Cut.
Cuts. Cuts.
Cuts.
Cuts.
Cuts.
Cuts.
So the recognition is with a structural deficit, with a guarantee of budget deficits for the next 10 years and high likelihood of the 10 years after, the 10 years after and the 10 years after that, the $1 trillion in debt now, which of course grows with this year's deficit, next year's deficit and until we go way past $1 trillion. That happens this financial year. And no doubt when we have this conversation in some way, shape or form, 10, 20 or even 30 years later, still a young fella, it would be closer to $2 trillion. So today, Angus Taylor, I thought, made a very interesting suggestion, which was, why don't we do this together? Now, you can call it savings, and I know that politically you'll bash me over cuts, but we've got to do something here. Why not have the best brains in your team and the best brains in my team have a look at that federal budget? Together, we would have the votes to be able to do something in the Senate, and maybe, just maybe, we would be able to change the direction of our economic future. Here was Angus Taylor making a common sense pitch today on the likelihood of the government remaining so for at least the next few years. But if they had the support of the opposition, they could maybe make some of the things that would be politically unpopular, but they'd have the cover of the majority of the parliament.
Setting up a prosperous economy requires us to put Australians first, not politics, not egos. And it's in that spirit that I wrote to the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, yesterday, proposing the establishment of a bipartisan task force on spending restraint. A task force comprising equal numbers of government and opposition members. A task force with the objective of identifying and agreeing to practical measures to reduce inflationary spending and commence budget repair.
Now, at a barbecue, this is what everybody wants. Now, we understand that every 3 years they have to go to war with each other to try to hold on to or to take power. But why not this as an idea? I would extend it to the minor parties in representation in the parliament and those like One Nation that have significant public support right now. I'd even let a teal or two in. Because if the majority of the parliament is able to get to a compromise position, it's not about the uni party taking care, but it means that what's tough for you is tough for me, is tough for them, ends up being better for everyone else. But of course, because the government wants to pretend that they are trimming their sails while they're actually adding a new spinnaker to budget deficit, and they know how effective he cuts, you pay was at the last election, Jim Chalmers not interested in bipartisanship or, dare I say, even working together with anyone, because, of course, he's the genius in the room.
After the way he failed as Shadow Treasurer, he should be let absolutely nowhere near a budget. He is the last person that anyone should be taking advice from or lectures from when it comes to the budget position or spending restraint.
So politics as usual. But 66% of people, the total voters, yes, some Labor, yes, some Greens, yes, some One Nation, yes, some Coalition, they want the government to pull its head in. because the government, when it spends more than it gets, adds to the debt, to the debt, to the debt, to the debt. And while the lights won't turn off anytime soon, the reality is that debt goes from being the 10th biggest thing we spend on the budget to eventually it goes, like in Victoria, into the top 5, meaning we'll spend more money on things like servicing debt than our national defence. One last thing from these polls about what people think should be cut from the federal budget.